everyone, and welcome to the Modern Philosophy Podcast. I am your host, Ashlee Haze, and this is part 2 of our So You Want to Be a Poet series. I created this series because people are constantly asking me what it's like to be a poet, and I wanted to invite poets I know to add their perspectives to the conversation and to shine light on the many ways one can approach poetry as a hobby or as a living. In this episode, I talked to my longtime friend and collaborator, Marshall Grip Gilson, about how they prioritize poetry and the many ways it can inspire other artistic forms. I hope you enjoy it. Marshall Grip Gilson is a writer, programmer, educator based primarily on the internet. Marshall graduated from Morehouse College in 2009 and the Georgia Institute of Technology in 2012. Their work is multimedia and interdisciplinary, ranging from written word to performance art to electronic installation. They have appeared on stage as an actor and a poet, self-published, and been printed in literary magazines, built digital chat books and Twitter bots, taught college courses and workshops, and have written, produced, and appeared in short films. Much of Marshall's work is fantastical, surreal, and absurdist. It confronts race, gender, mental imbalance, loneliness, existential dread, and sometimes robots. In their spare time, they enjoy board games, avoiding attention, and writing biographies in third person. Marshall, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for coming on the show.
Of course. My pleasure. Happy to be here.
So, Marshall, can you just tell my listeners a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and how did you come to poetry? What was that journey?
Sure. Well, I was born in Providence, Rhode Island. I lived there until 18 when I moved to Atlanta for college. I stayed in Atlanta for college and then a couple years after that working, and then a couple years after that in grad school, and then moved back to Boston to be a computer programmer, which is what both my degrees are in. Um, I started writing poetry as a really, really small child. I was uh, like depressed very young. I had juvenile depression. And I started writing poetry because I was having a lot of trouble communicating my emotions and I was having a lot of trouble like understanding social interactions.
Mhm.
And writing poetry was like a forum for me to work all of that out. So I could and did come home, after school and just like plant my face in a notebook and write poetry and try to work it out. And it kind of worked. So I started writing like free verse poetry first, but then like around maybe sixth or seventh grade, I started like connecting that to rap, and that got me into rap. Um, when I went to college, I joined a poetry club for the same reason because I was like wanted to know other human beings, and socializing is always difficult for me. And then that just kind of like grew into being on the National Poetry Slam circuit. So I was on, I don't know, I lost count, a bunch of teams. My first team was in 2008. My last team was in 2017. And then there was 1 year in there where I wasn't on them. So that's maybe 9 years, 8 years, 9 years. Um, yeah, so that's like kind of it. Like writing has always been the thing that I do to make sense of my life, to find meaning. Um, and luckily, I've like learned that language is communicative and bidirectional. So, in finding ways to describe my own experience and make sense of my own life, I'm also better able to relate to other people and understand their experiences and share mine and exchange and like grow my understanding of the world.
Marshall?
Is that too much?
No, it is exactly what we need.
Okay.
The other part of this podcast is also showing the ways that poetry can really change lives and like change our personhood and how it can be the conduit for how we really connect with each other. One of the many conduits that we use as artists to connect people to each other. So it's dope hearing that. I don't even think I knew that you started out as a kid.
Oh yeah. I was a weirdo when
Now.
you met me, but please believe I was even more of a weirdo before I started writing.
Same. Also, I started writing when I was like 10, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I've just been weird my whole life, and I like it here.
Yeah.
So, So you have like this bilateral kind of poetry home or where you were practicing poetry, right? Like you were in the South for a little bit and then you went back to the Northeast. And were you out west a bit? Did I make that up?
I mean, yeah, the first team I was on was actually Salt Lake City, um, because I was actually still in college. I was still at Morehouse, and I did a co-op semester in Ogden, Utah, and
Wow.
boy, I thought I was isolated before, and so every weekend I would like just drive down to Salt Lake City to go to the like one poetry show, and I ended up on their team, and then I was on Atlanta, Java Monkey twice, Atlanta Art Amok twice, Providence, Cambridge, Boston, Boston.
I love it. I love it. So are there any how does that influence your work? Did you ever pick up anything from these places that you were in?
Oh, most definitely. Like when I was in Utah, this is gonna sound really stupid. I feel stupid every time I tell this story, but it's like the honest truth. I was like when I started writing, I just kinda like stream of consciousness everything. I just like put pen to paper and wrote, and whatever came out was the writing. And so that first year I was on the team in Salt Lake City, I brought this poem to my team and I was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I kinda like it. It's alright." And I read it to them and they were like, "You're right. It's okay." And my coach was like, "Why don't you edit it?" And I was like, "What? You can
What?
change the words after you write them?" So like, yeah, I mean, the poetry slam taught me everything about writing, like if not about writing itself and about its like centrality to understanding my life, it definitely gave me like some like practical skill in it and taught me think about like grammar and how to present things such that an audience will hear them and just what the
Mhm,
process has to look like and how often you have to be doing it. Like on a similar note, one of my one of my coaches, or I want to say it was like somebody in Atlanta, Aaron G or somebody, we were like talking about our team and
mhm,
looking at the teams who were winning, who like at the time were, I think was like Charlotte, I think was the big team, like won twice in a row.
mhm.
And we were looking at all those poets and just being like, wow, how do they do that? How do they do that? And one of my coaches says, well, yeah, the people who win though, this is what they do. They do this every day. And I was so confused by that because, at the time I was still, I guess, in school or I was working and I was like, how could this be what you're doing every day? This is very much a hobby to me. This is a thing that I like come home and do in my personal life. So how could I find the time to do it every day? And then over the next decade, it just like kind of got more and more important to me until it crossed over and now this is the thing I do every day. So I
Yeah,
like kind of get it
yeah.
now. I'm like on the other side of that divide and I was like, oh yeah, you do have to do it every day.
Yeah, I think I had that moment too because I was a competition gal, but even in like high school. And so I do a competition and then I maybe would not rehearse until it was the next
Yeah.
competition. And then I realized to be prepared for competition, you had to rehearse.
Yeah, it's like it seems like really apparent, but that step is not obvious.
No, 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 especially not when you're a
Especially
kid.
yeah, and
Mhm.
especially not like no cap, but when you're like good at it,
When
and
you're
I think that
talented, yeah, I was
yeah,
gonna say that.
like you can when you like get up on stage and like just do whatever, and people are like, "Wow, that was pretty competent." And then you're like, "Well, why do I need to practice? I'm good at it." But it actually does
Exactly.
take a lot of practice,
It really
even and
does.
especially if you're good at it.
Yes, especially, and a lot of collaboration and a
Mhm.
lot of people willing to tell you that this is okay,
Yeah.
and it's your okayest thing yet. And I think that that's super valuable. So, Marshall, is poetry your primary artistic outlet?
I don't even know how to answer that. I always have trouble with this when I'm like sending a bio places too because I kind of do a lot of different stuff.
Mhm,
I it was while I was working a full time tech job, poetry was my primary artistic outlet because it was kind of the thing I had time to do. Um, but then when I started like looking past my tech job and started thinking about art full time, I kind of wanted to get bigger than that and expand more. And I think that slam poetry in particular is really good for the thing that it is, which is like a first person narrative or a first person monologue or a contained story.
mhm,
So anyway, long story short, I'm like kind of moving to screenwriting now, as you're aware. I like
mhm.
uh, still write poetry. I did a show uh, this earlier this month, where they like invited me to read poems. And I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to go through my vault and find some poems to read because I haven't written any in so long. And then I like looked in my Google Drive folder and realized I'd like written 10 poems this year. So
Oh,
I
wow.
think that poetry still kind of has the same role in my, like, emotional life, and so, like, I when I went to
Mhm.
that the reason I didn't feel like I had been writing any poems is because none of the projects I'm working on are poems, like, I'm, like, working on a book and working on a pilot and working on none of those are poems, but I still am writing poems because it's where I go when I need to think through something, and so, 2020 was a hard year. It was complicated and it was
Mhm.
confusing, and so I did end up writing poems to process that kind of without realizing it. So I don't know if it's my primary. It's definitely still in there.
I think I needed to hear that though, even, as I'm in my own practice, like
Mm.
to still go there for the reasons you went there, that you've been going there.
Yeah,
I needed that.
I think the poetry slam, kind of interfered sometimes, um, because it's competitive, and so there's like an incentive to write things in a way that will work for the game of it and work for the competition of it, irrespective of how
Mm,
they affect you as a human being. I don't think those things like I think I know people who for whom that distinction is like central to slam and ruins it. They're like, I can't
mhm.
do it because it's commodified in this way, and it didn't ever feel like that to me. Like they were mutually exclusive, but it did feel like something that I had to pay attention to because if I wasn't, then it's very easy to write things just for the audience and not for yourself. And I also kind of think that like that happens in other genres. Like
For sure.
I'm finding that writing screenplays. Like I think there's a lot of screenplay writing happening that's just kind of like this would be a great high concept movie and doesn't like really explore or unpack anything.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I think that, as we come to our creative practices, always like trying to make sure that you're in line with your integrity and be like,
Mm,
is this thing, making me like competition can literally bring out the best and the worst in
yeah.
everything. And just valuing it for what it is and setting just good boundaries with whatever that outlet is going to be. Is poetry art your primary source of income?
No. It's my only job at the moment, but not my primary source of income, if that makes any sense. I
Yeah.
was working, I finished grad school in 2012 and then worked for 6 years, 5, 6 years. I guess I started in 2013 and ended in 2019. So a little bit more than 6 years, as a programmer, as a computer programmer. And I just like kind of made a lot of money doing that. So I quit that job in 2019, to focus on art full time. And I started by going back to school and then withdrew from school because they were racist. And so now
Ooh,
I'm,
let's talk about that a
oh
minute.
God, do you want to? But
Yes.
it's like, I don't know. So I'm like, it's my primary job. It's my primary work. And I treat it that way. Like this is the thing I get up and do every day. I have plans
Mhm,
for like how much I'm supposed to make and produce. And like, it is work. And like part of the reason I was able to leave my tech job is because I planned for it to be work, just because even while I was working my
mm,
tech job, like, I was trying to grow my art and trying to be better at it and trying to, like, make it make it more sustainable and make it self-sufficient. And so, like, the year before I quit officially was, like, kind of a planning year where I, like, took a screenwriting class, like, an open enrollment screenwriting class and applied to schools and applied to grants and, like, tried to set myself up with the velocity that I would need to, like, make it my primary work. Um, but yeah, from a monetary perspective, no, I'm actually still living off savings. But yeah, I don't know. We talked a little bit about this, but I think it's hard because even in a world where like the economy is superficially stable, which it is currently
mhm,
not, art is a
mhm.
hard thing to sell. I think like
Yeah.
capitalism puts a similar pressure on art as like slam does or as competition does because it is a kind of competition and to some extent you do have to like demonstrate value to somebody if they're going to pay you for it. But I don't know. I heard this really good metaphor that was like it's really easy for artists to feel like cars on the road, like, vying for position, and to some
Mm,
degree, that's true. We are all, like, trying to get ahead, and we are all trying to move forward toward our destination, but also, like, we are all on the road together, so if you, like,
yes.
just do something really sideways, it's gonna cause problems for everybody, And
Yeah.
also, while you're like on the road jockeying with the other cars, you forget that like the people who run the economy, the people with real money are like not on the road with you. They're not driving, they're flying over you in a private jet.
Period.
And they really can't see your car, but they can definitely see the direction the traffic is headed. So you should make sure you're coordinating with everybody so that the traffic looks right. So I don't know. I like, yeah, money's hard. Money's
That
hard.
is great, but that's
It's
great.
a really
Money's
good metaphor,
hard.
right?
It's
Yeah.
really good metaphor.
Yeah.
And money's hard, but like you gave us some nuggets, right? Because again, that's the point of this is to showcase the different ways. My journey has been kind of like up and down, where like I'm a full-time artist for like months at a time.
Mm,
Then all of a sudden I'm like, all right, you need to get a job. Then I'm like, okay, I can't keep this job because now my art's calling me
yeah.
back. And then it's like, so I've learned to manage the flow and the ebb and flow and that way. And then you sort of had like this long stretch of work so that you could
Yeah.
then work towards like this long stretch of creating art as work or,
Yeah. I feel like
dedication
that's a,
to
a thing that a
practice.
lot of artists and writers in particular kind of end up doing is like having another job or another source of income that supplements it when, because art aside, like freelancing in any industry is like difficult. You have to manage your own work and it is kind of like spurty, like it happens sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. And
Right.
so, yeah, I like, I was doing that for a long time with like just a straight up day job, but I've also met like people who teach and write on the side. Or I met I met this one woman who was a stand-up comedian and then also like wrote computer science curriculums freelance. And like between those two
Wow.
things was making it work. But yeah.
Wow. Which I mean, you kind of do like this computer science thing, which
Oh
we're
man.
gonna get to
Ah.
because your mind. Marshall, swear to God, for a long time, I didn't know that like science oriented people could also be arts oriented people.
That's so sad.
So I think when I met you, I was like, what? This is against everything I've ever known
I
about the
was
world.
really I was really on that for a minute. It's like it's funny because my partner actually has 2 degrees in music and was like a music professor for a long time, and then did the opposite thing that I did and was like, "The art's not making enough money, so I wanna do computer science now," and is like now working as a software developer. So we like tease each other because when we first met, I was like, "Yeah, STEM, screw your humanities."
Right.
And now I'm like a full-time artist and she works as a computer programmer.
I'm glad I've gotten to see that
Yeah.
progression over the years. So, okay, so let's talk about this, right? Over the last, I think, year or two, and correct me if I'm wrong. I've seen that you have shifted some of your energy, if not more energy, towards like screenwriting,
Yeah.
and then also I know you're developing your curriculums. What
Oh, man.
what made you shift that energy into screenwriting and film? And I would like to hear about that like film school experience for you.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a long story. We could spend literally the entire podcast talking about my experience of film school, but like I said,
We'll
I
bring you
was
back for that.
yeah, that's fine. But we like in 2017, the last time I was on a poetry slam team was the house slam team for the second year, and we came in third nationally, which was the second year in a row that the house slam team had done that. And I was on the team both years, and so I'd like been on final stage twice in a row. And to be honest, that like kind of felt like it. Like I kind of
Mhm.
wanted to win, but not enough to like do it again. And moreover, having like been on a highly competitive team 2 years in a row, I kind of realized how much energy I would have to expend doing that.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, I just kind of like wanted the seat to be more open. I was like feeling it a little the last year I was on a team that like I maybe shouldn't have taken up that slot, but
Mhm.
in 2018 it was like definitely I'm like oh past that. I just done slam poetry for a long time and I was looking for like a new format, a new venue. I think
Mhm. Mhm.
screenwriting is good because it's character based, and so it like allows me to tell bigger stories than I could as a single individual in 3 minutes.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and I also it's, like, kind of been in the back of my mind for a long time, like, I've, like, pretended to write scripts when I was in college, but
Didn't
the
we all? Didn't
yeah,
we all do
yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I think it looks it's not hard, like, I'm really strident about the idea that art is not, like, a superpower, it's a skill, and you can develop it. Like, yes, you, listener who thinks they have no artistic skill, you can develop it, it's fine, it's art, it's subjective. But also, screenwriting is harder than it looks. Like, it looks like it should be really easy, and it's not really easy, it's just, like, the same
Nope.
level of difficulty as every other art. Um, But so yeah, so I was like looking for a bigger venue, a bigger format, and so I started thinking about screenplays. I literally just wrote one, and it was okay. I submitted it a place, and it was like a semifinalist in a competition, which was affirming. And then I wrote another one, another short script, and submitted to a competition, and it won, and it got produced. And then I took this class at Emerson, and like we're talking right now about the year where I'm still working, you know. Um,
Okay, okay.
yeah, and so like I
So you were doing both.
correct. I was like getting up every day and doing this day job, and then also like coming home and writing. I was like taking the time that I otherwise would have used on poetry, like my semi-professional art career time, and writing short scripts instead. And then I took a class at Emerson, like an open enrollment class, and wrote a couple of shorts in there. And then I had this portfolio, and so I applied to a couple of grad schools. I got into one of them. I got a fellowship, so it was a full ride, which was really exciting. And the fellowship was um, like they're like a diversity fellowship kind of. It was like meant for a student who was like particularly interested in issues of, I guess, representation and justice, and like it was kind of ill defined, but whatever. It paid for for the tuition. Um,
Mhm.
and when I got there, I realized that they didn't really have anything to say. And that was like kind of disappointing because I had quit my job to go to this institution, and I had moved states to go to this institution. And it wasn't even that there was like nothing to say, it was just that it was kind of just applied time, you know? And like I think that a lot of school is sort of like that, that if you show up ready to learn something, even if there's nobody else there doing that, you can still do it. Just you have a room now to sit in and read the book, or you have a room now to sit in and
Mhm.
write and
Mhm.
practice. And so to that extent, it was actually really useful that it like gave me deadlines. And it gave me like encouragement. And I took my first semester a couple of humor classes, which was supremely helpful because I didn't think of myself as funny, which was not true. I just didn't have any practice in it. And so it gave me an excuse to practice. So, like, I don't think that learning to tell jokes was something I couldn't have done, but it did give me an excuse to do it. And then
Mhm.
toward the end of my first semester, they set us up with this like module class that was supposed to be about like a running a show and running a writer's room for a show, for a TV show. Um,
Mhm.
and the person that they put us in the room with, and the script that he gave us was just extremely problematic. It was based on this 1990 maybe 7 movie called Copland,
Mhm.
in which we follow a bunch of uh, like super bigoted cops, um, while they deal with the fallout from one of them murdering a black kid. And like to be
Oh.
clear, this is not like The Hate You Give, where we're like talking about police brutality. The cops are the protagonists. Okay, so they're like trying to get the guy who murdered the black kid off and cover it up because they're all involved. And I was just, it was confusing and it was hurtful, and I was like, I was taken aback because I honestly just didn't feel like the class was there for it, you know? Like, I don't I
Mhm.
like, the response the institution kept giving me when we like, during the fallout of all of this was like, "Well, we're gonna deal with some sensitive material, like, you have to be prepared," and my issue was really not ever that the material was sensitive, but rather that the attitudes of all of the primarily white people I was in the room with were insensitive to it, if that makes sense, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I was the only black person. There was, one, Israeli man of color. There was one, uh, Chinese man who's literally from Beijing, and then everybody else was white people. Like, literally 5 of the 10 people in the class were white men, the 3
Mm.
masks of color, and then 2 white women. And
Wow.
so we watched the original film, I read the pilot, and I'm, like, absolutely appalled by it. There's, like, parts in the script that, like, the teacher wrote, by the way. Like, the script we're reading is, like, the script of the guy who's they're putting us in class with. There are parts of the script that are,
Oh.
like, about the cops riding into the hood like an army, and they, like, chase down this, like, black person in the hood and murder him in the street, and then the crowd applauds. And I was just like, "What is going on here?" And that's, like, even putting aside, like, some of the more subtle stuff that I felt like I saw about, like, the way that characters are described, like diegetic choices, where, like, it's not even about, like,
Mm,
what the plot is, but, like, why are you calling this teenager sexy, you know? Um,
mm.
and, like, as an example, one of the things that was happening in the plot was one of the cops was like sleeping with this young Latina girl from the hood and pumping her for information. And I'm like, that's assault. Okay. If a cop is sleeping with an informant, that's like a huge conflict of interest. It's problematic. It's assault. And like, it's one thing for the script to not deal with that, but for me to say that in class and then nobody goes, yeah, that is problematic.
Yeah, for it
Like,
to
that's
just
what
be sort
really,
of
really ran me up against it. So anyway, the advice I got honestly from everybody in my life was like, give it a second, Marshall. You don't know that this is gonna be, maybe the teacher really did think through this. Maybe they have a plan for how they're gonna deal with all of this. So I did, I, like, did all the work. I came prepared to talk, and nope, the conversation was exactly what I expected it to be. And so I, like, had to say all that in class kind of, and
yeah.
it, like, was freaking me out because, again, I'm sitting in a room full of people who, like, don't hear that, like, don't hear that some of this stuff is, like, deeply problematic, and the teacher storms out. Like,
Oh,
he literally gets up, he's like, "Well, we'll see what the head of the school has to say about this," and walks out in the middle of the class, leaving literally all 10 of us sitting there alone,
yeah.
which bugs me out. I'm like I said, I could talk about this for literally a year, but, it bugged me out because at the beginning of class, he literally started the class by saying, "This is my script, but, I'm not worried about criticism. I've heard every criticism, so don't feel like you have to be gentle." And I was like, "Okay, well, good," because I feel like it's bigoted,
Right.
and then he stormed out on it. So anyway, that's like not, I didn't like leave because of that incident, but that's like
Yeah.
was kind of like the big tipping point. Like, there was a lot of other stuff in my experience at that institution that was like very similar, or it was like the impetus for racism, the response to racism was being put on me as like the one black person in the class, and I kind of didn't. I didn't, like, it didn't matter enough to me, Like, I was kind of getting something, I was
Mm.
kind of getting something out of it, but it was also kind of just applied time, and I didn't go to the institution to, like, fix their racism. I went to the institution to learn about screenwriting, and if trying to fix their racism was interfering with me learning about screenwriting, then I couldn't do it, and so I withdrew. But there's, like, so much stuff. I have this fantasy of, like, confronting them about it, which
Yeah.
don't, because there's no good that could come of it, Like, either they're going to recognize their complicity in it or they're not, and if they were, they would have done it while I was there, so I don't really feel like there's any good that can come out of it, but I have this fantasy of confronting them, and just every time they, like, try to disagree, I tell them a different anecdote of one of them being racist. Because it was just like that every day, like, every single day somebody was saying something. Like, the first time I showed up to the campus in a dress, the head of the program looks at me and says, "You're looking very trans today." I'm like, "What does that mean, man? What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Was I what? What does that mean? What do you think it means to look trans? A, and B, does looking trans factor on my identity? Am I more trans today than I was yesterday? And C, why do you think I care?
And
Like,
is this your business?
why
Is
did you
this
even
your
comment
business?
on it? For what reason? I like, honestly, I'm like, you're like getting me riled up, but I like I remember doing this at like my day job, at like the at my programming job. I like showed up in a dress, and this guy that I like literally don't know, it's kind of a big company, he wasn't on my team, was just like, "You look beautiful today." And I'm like, I know you mean that in your head as a compliment, but really it's not. Like, you don't say, I don't know you. So you wouldn't have said that to me if you saw me standing here in like jeans and a t-shirt, which means that
Mhm.
really all you're saying is, I noticed that you are defying my expectations. I like,
Mm.
oh man, there's with this book I read this year that points out that a lot of white people in particular imagine that slurs are kind of like bad words. They're words that you don't want to say. They're mean words. They make people feel bad. And like, that's kind of true, but it's also not the whole story. Like, the the dangerous part about slurs is that they draw on social structures to harm
Yes.
somebody, like, it,
Yes.
like, calling somebody a slur is only a problem if it like grounds them in the reality that this social difference could be the end of their life or could be like actually interruptive to them. It's like why slurs on white people don't land. It's because that structure doesn't exist. Like it's not threatening in any actual way. And so a lot of like what I felt like I experienced was that, it was like stuff that like you didn't call me the slur, but this interaction still was grounded very heavily in the social power dynamic, and like the power
Mm.
differential between us. Anyway, I'm like, this is my life, I'm like unpacking it all the time. I like don't have any concrete answers about it.
Yeah, but I
Whew.
mean, we're we're black in art, and
Yeah,
being black in art and academia is like, honestly, it's a monster. I try to pretend doesn't exist
yeah,
because it is such a big monster and it's so much energy to try to slay racism in
yes,
academia. And it's like, why is this my job?
exactly,
Now I'm exhausted of this. And
literally,
now I'm gonna go make my art outside of academia, only for you to tell me that it's less valid outside of
literally.
this
I was,
space. But
oh my god, I was in one of the last classes I was taking in my second and final semester was a teaching practicum. I was like preparing myself to teach the next semester and like writing syllabuses and writing curricula. And at the same time, like we were dealing with the fallout from this like super racist professor.
Mhm.
And like we sat down in a meeting. Like, first of all, let me just say that the institutional response to it was immediate and panicky. Like, this happened, and I literally got an email that night that was like, "Can you sit down with four of us tomorrow?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not. I'm like not sitting down one on one with four of my bosses. What? No."
Yeah,
But
no.
that meeting did eventually happen, and by the time it happened, it had ballooned to like 6 people or 7 people. And in that meeting, I said directly to all of them, this is really problematic. I'm kind of hurt by it, but also I'm like more worried that this is just like a pattern and I don't want it to like continue happening. But I also like, don't want this to turn into a curriculum design project for me because I feel like that's a thing that happens and a thing that specifically happened at this institution was when something went wrong, they go, okay, well, you saw it go wrong, so teach us how to fix it. And I'm
So
like,
you teach it, right?
exactly. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not the are you paying me to design the curriculum? I'm not that's not what I'm here for. But that's exactly what it turned into. And so by the time I was leaving, they were like sending me emails like complaining that I hadn't produced enough research for them. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like what research do you think I'm going to show you that's going to make you understand why that was problematic? Like what
Yeah.
research do I have to show you that makes you understand that asking me for research is problematic?
Right, because
And
what research have you done?
yeah, that's what really messed me up is I was like, why do I have to do the research? I'm the only one who saw it. Like, but anyway,
Ain't
so
that about it?
I say all that to say, like, part of the reason I'm like teaching workshops and teaching classes now independently is like I saw academia and I was like, this is terrible, but I also don't want to stop learning. I don't want to stop writing, and I don't want to not teach just because you guys couldn't handle me there. And so I like spun it up myself. Construct.school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about this. So you have spun it up yourself
Yeah.
and you have now started your own learning environment,
Yeah.
which of course I think is awesome because this
Yeah.
is mine.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about
I
that?
would love to. Yeah. I when I was during doing that teaching practicum in my last semester, and part of it was supposed to be teaching a workshop to the undergrads.
Hmm.
Um, the workshop I designed was called "The Short Script as a Form Poem," which kind of gets at my uh, understanding of the intersection between screenwriting and poetry. I think you actually took one version of it,
I
but
did.
yeah,
I did.
yeah. So I was like starting to develop this, and then COVID happened, and also I realized I was at my wits' end with them, and those two things are not are like connected. And so I withdrew, but not before having the realization that COVID was going to like severely interrupt in-person learning. And my
Hmm.
workshop was planned to be like 3 hours on a Saturday in a room, which I couldn't do anymore. And so I started thinking about ways to do this kind of education and do this kind of like um, create this kind of learning environment for people marginalized from academia, but without a physical presence. And lucky me, I'm
Hmm.
a computer programmer. So
Yay.
I started spinning up web forums and teaching workshops in them. And I taught maybe 4 or 5 over the course of last year. And then that was all in preparation for teaching full length courses. So I'm actually like about to start next week the first 2 courses of Construct College of Creative Pedagogy, which is what I call it. One of them
I
is
love it.
a a writing class, like just a creative writing class, and one of them is a digital media literacy class where we're gonna like read some technical articles and read about the singularity and read about bots. So,
I love it. I love it. I
yeah,
would have taken it, but February's crazy. But I
yeah,
love it, and I try to take your classes whenever I can.
yeah, definitely.
So you all, we'll get to where you can find Marshall, but real quick, so you are doing this cool thing where like you're putting your goals on a public forum, which is one of the most terrifying things to me. Mine are confined to like my post-it notes
Yeah,
app and my dry erase board in my room.
yeah,
But you are not, you are adding an extra layer of accountability by posting your art goals as Twitter.
yeah,
Why is it important for you to be transparent about that?
sure.
It yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two parts to it. The first one is just like you said, it's accountability, and particularly having it public, you know, makes me feel like I have to get the stuff done. I started doing it um, this month. I started at the end of last month and have started doing it daily this month. Um, it's partially just because it like motivates me and it keeps me accountable to what I said I was going to do. You know, if at the beginning of the month I said I was going to do these 6 things, then if at the end of the month I didn't do those 6 things, like I need to understand why. It's not necessarily that I'm like wrong or bad or should have done them and I didn't, but I can't track it unless I have the availability of that data. Um, and I
Mhm.
think that the other part is that I hope it's useful to other people. I had a friend of mine. I've like kind of been doing similar things to this, like posting publicly about my art progress for many, many, many years. And
Mhm.
so when I was prepping for, I don't even remember. I don't even remember some poetry competition. You know, I like realized I had a set of stuff to be done, and started doing this, started being like, okay, here are my goals for October. I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And then every day I could look at that list of goals and say, how close am I to them? How much of it have I done? What do I have left to do? And at the end of the month, look back on it. And I started posting those on social media, and people started reacting to them and doing them also. And it was mostly my friends. My social media following is not really big, but I also think that kind of communal benefit and communal support um, is important and will like improve our artistic goals as like a movement as opposed to as individuals. I think that
Mhm.
the thing you're talking about is really real. Like people don't see the process, they see like my script won a competition, and so that's it. It's like a great writer, but actually great writing is mostly daily editing, and that's tedious. And so to see how like I go from 0, from nothing, from like a vague plan and a goal to like an actual script or an actual project or a book. I hope like demystifies the process for people who are struggling with that on their own, people who want
Mhm.
that kind of process. But I also just think that yeah, like I said, it demystifies it. I heard s a conversation between a couple of my poetry teammates years ago where one of them said, "I feel like there are 2 kinds of writers. There are writers who just, like, work every day and are really diligent and do st and, like, really grind it, and that's how they come up with great stuff, and then there are people who are just, like, on some other shit, and they're like, brains do that and then they write it down." And my other teammate responded, yeah, but the thing you don't see is that second category is really the same as the first one. Like the people who like look to you like they're just on something else and like you can't figure out how they came up from with it. It's like probably just from daily writing. It's probably just from practicing. And so like that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of where I feel I am. Like I get a lot of praise, and I don't say that to aggrandize myself, but it just kinda
Mhm.
confuses me because it doesn't feel like that to me, It doesn't feel like I'm a genius who just has a lightning bolt strike them. It feels like, well, yeah, because I did it every day for the last 3 months. And so
Yeah, I actually just saw a quote by Toni Morrison, which I hadn't seen by her. And she said, I don't write every day, but I think every day.
yeah,
And that is me, I have the same thing where people are like, how'd you do this? And how'd you do this? And, you just did the thing.
yeah,
And I'm like, well, I've thought about it for months. Like,
Yeah.
I think I messaged you like 8 months before a project when I'm just like, "I think I'm gonna do this thing." And I just think and think and
Yeah.
think so that when it's time to do, it
Yeah.
demystifies the doing to me,
Yeah.
just sort of
I feel like
evaluating it.
somebody told me they heard Michaela Cole saying a similar thing about "I May Destroy You." It's like, didn't know how it was gonna happen at first, but they signed up and they got a deadline and then they started writing them and they had to be done when they were done, and so they did it, and that's, like, kind of what it boils down to, and that's, like, also I think why I'm doing these goals. It's, like, partially because accountability, and I think it'll be help people and transparency and demystifying, and also partially because I just have a lot to do, and I needed to look at it all and figure out when it was all gonna get done. And
Mhm.
I was struggling with this a little bit last year, partially, I think, because, the pandemic was confusing everybody and confusing everybody's schedules and making it hard to concentrate and plan. That I was uh, like over scheduling, or I would like look at all the stuff I had to do and just do today whatever feels interesting to me. And that's
Mhm.
often good enough. Like I often find that I have enough bandwidth, enough time in the day that if I just like do what feels good and natural, I will get to the point that I'm trying to get to. But
Mhm.
looking at 2021, it felt like there were a lot of different things, a lot of different goals that I was trying to accomplish, and a lot of different targets I was trying to hit in like a very coordinated, synchronized order that I wasn't going to be able to do unless I planned it. And so that's like also partially where this came from. Is I literally opened a Google Doc and made a list of everything I was trying to finish in 2021, everything I was trying to do in 2021, and broke it up. Like I have said before to people that the process of creating any project, but a writing project, feels to me like a process of going from very general to very specific. So I like start with the vague notion that I want to write a TV show. And then, okay, well, what does that mean? I have to have a premise for it. So I'll like come up with a log line. Okay, now I have that. And that's a lot. That's good, but that's still not the same as a script. So I break it down a little bit more like, well, okay, what would it entail to tell this plot? Who are the characters? What do they do? What are the plot points? Okay, that's good. I have an outline now, but that's still not the same as a script. So I guess I have to make it a little bit more specific and like, what are the scenes actually in this thing? And then I've got an outline of the scenes, but okay, that's still not the script. So I make it a little bit more specific and I actually write the scene. And okay, this scene's okay, but this sentence doesn't make a lot of sense as it doesn't really relate to the themes at the three levels up. And so then I'm tweaking this sentence. And all of those steps to me feel like writing, like I'm
Yeah,
producing a different,
they're all the work.
exactly, I'm producing a different piece of text for each of them, but not all of them is like diving straight into the script and typing words in it. Um, and so I don't know. I like that Toni Morrison quote really hits it on the head. Is like thinking is writing too, because some of that stuff I didn't I didn't need to move tokens around on the page if I like was in deep thought about what the plot's going to be. Like
Mm.
I think sometimes about coding and how I use this really arcane text editor for actually both programming and for writing called Vim, and it's weird and it's like at the command line and it's like kind of like difficult when you first start it. But what somebody pointed out to me is that usually the holdup in like programming, but in writing too, is not how fast you can type the words, but rather how fast you know which words to type. And so like the
Mm.
tool doesn't matter as much as you think it does because
Mhm. Yeah.
that's not usually the critical path. So like figuring out which words to type is often something I can do in my head, which is kind of funny because I'll then lie around the house like staring at the ceiling and my partner's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm working." But
I think I tweeted something. I'm like, half of my creative life is sitting on my couch
it's so true.
staring at guys' grocery games, trying to figure out, work out in my head what the heck, or just staring into space.
Yeah,
And my mom always says that she's like, "You're always like daydreaming and thinking." I'm like, "Yeah," so that when I get to the computer, the thing is there.
yeah. There's this
So,
line in
mhm.
Community where Donald Glover's character, somebody's like harassing Donald Glover's character. And he's like, "No, I want to be smart so I can do nothing, or have a job that looks from a distance like I do nothing." So I feel all the time. So I'm like, yeah, kind of.
Yeah, kinda exactly that. Like, artists don't do anything. Smoke tweeds, and I'm like, there are other things.
Yeah,
So, Marshall, okay, I'm gonna make this segment because
please.
I've been wanting to for a long time. So, Marshall and I are working on a TV show together, and I'm
Hey,
so excited about it.
shout out.
So I'm gonna say we are working on it, and there will be like you'll learn a lot more about the projects that we're doing together. You all know I'm starting Philosophy Media Group because I'm sort of shifting into production. But Marshall is gonna be Marshall has been really one of my great collaborators this year, and so I'm really excited about
Mhm.
this year.
Yeah.
And Marshall, what are you looking forward to, and what are you most proud of so far?
From on the year or on the script?
Well, I guess both.
Oh, okay. Um, uh, I'm uh, I'm just glad that I like started the year running. I think 2021
Yeah,
is going to be hard. Um,
yeah.
and not even just for me personally, just kind of for the continent. I think that
Mhm.
we have a lot of societal problems that we're
Yep.
straight up not dealing with, and it really
Yep.
worries me. I think that a lot of people have died in the last year, and I think that a lot more are probably going to die in the year to come. And I think it's going to be hard on all of us. I think that COVID is like it's a trauma that we're not processing yet because we're still in the middle of it.
'Cause still in it, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just happy that I'm like safe and healthy and able to write at all. I think that I did an okay job on my January goals. There's a couple things that took me a little bit longer than I expected, but on the whole, I'm just grateful to still be capable of doing the things that I want to do, which is not a given, you know. Um, and on the script,
Mhm.
honestly just super excited about the prospect of producing it. like I wanted to be a television. The MFA program I enrolled in actually forced me to answer this question because I was like, I want to be a screenwriter, and they were like, right, but what do you want to write? And I was like, screenplays. And so they like
Mhm.
their program was split between film and TV. And so thinking
Mhm.
about that made me realize that I'm actually like way more interested in episodic content than I am in like feature films. And
Mhm.
so like the idea that that could be happening, that we like could be starting one, that we could be producing it, that we could be, you know, like seeing it on screen is very exciting. But the pilot I wrote last year won an award and got a table read, which was super
Interesting.
exciting too. To
That's
just like
great.
see human beings playing the characters and delivering the lines and hearing their interpretations of them. But it would be super cool to see it produced. So I really hope we can work that out. I'm optimistic.
I'm optimistic too. And the Hazes Higher Learning community will be an active part of this. So you all make sure you tune into the HHL pages. Marshall, I would be remiss if I didn't at least offer you the microphone for art uses. This
Oh,
has been one of my favorite interviews. This is one of my favorite series
yeah.
because one, I just talk to my friends generally, and I know that there are people who are friends with people they don't like, but I actually like my friends
Yeah.
a lot. And so this is one of my favorite series. And I know that this interview people are going to listen to over and over and share.
That's
But would you like to share a piece of your art?
sure. Let me just rap because that's always quick.
Yes.
Mm. I wake up in a grave daily and dig back to the surface. Purchase 6 packs of detergent. The scourge is all in my nervous system. Words of wisdom I learned from dingbats and insurgents, and now I'm left to ringmaster the circus. The future only arrives by antenna. I adjust them to find me gestation to decide if I'm destined for greatness or a psychiatry patient. You might have heard me say this, but lately my mind has been racing, trying to survive and stay safe even when the state is violently racist. If they break down the door and kill me in my sleep, they're sowing a trillion seeds and they will feel me when they reap. We're peeling back the sheets to see what's really underneath because they don't seriously want to beef. They already fearing what we teach. We're holding up the mirror. They see the appearance of the beast with syrup on its cheek and pieces of our lyrics in its teeth. How is this
Woo!
materially different from tyranny? Not everything is what it appears to be. We're running interference until the reinforcements arrive. Tired of distortion and lies, we're forging a sword and the sky gets enormous and we won't melt it back down until we're sure we'll survive. No more performing, no more borders, no more fake mourning who's died, no more following orders. The time has come now for the poor to arise. If you or your loved one suffer from any one of these symptoms, then please call the number below to donate something to the fund for the victims. I know it's a system, but someone's making all these fucking decisions, and when no one seems to
Mm,
like them, I gotta wonder just who was it that picked them. I studied the vision. They want to make this whole country a prison to give subsidies to the moneyed and punishment to anybody who isn't. They swore it was beautiful weather and they knew that I could just lose the sweater. Taught me the calculus, then act surprised I put two and two together. Put the Constitution right through a shredder. They learned to perform all the same illusions but better. They're switching the game, removing the meta, the movements. Now get up. Excuse if I ruin the setup. I never ruin a punchline. I think we're through with the fun times. I stick and move on the one times. You need to move to the front line. We do the show once and it's run live. The can is to stop it. The plans that can stop it. We got them. Just hand me your thumb drive. Coming untied. We ride out at sunrise. Make sure that you're packed. Ain't no reversing and no turning back when they're turning the hearse to a merciful act. They take and they take, and I'm feeling a lot like a priest losing faith in the church. Complain every day about how thankless the work and then fall back asleep in a blanket of dirt like you.
I was losing my shit.
Out of control.
You're the second person to come on here and rap.
Yeah.
My creative director rap last season. And so I think we're going to release a mixtape at some point so that we can raise money for this show.
Yo, on the low, this is like the same as the poetry. Is like, I feel like I haven't been rapping because I haven't been focusing on it. And then I looked up and I was like, oh, I have an EP here. So shout out to the EP and the chapbook I didn't know I was writing.
Shout out to that. Yo, don't you love it when that happens?
Yeah,
Yo, I am very much a fan, very much still into all the work you put out. So glad to work with you, Marshall. Thank you for coming to Haze's Higher Learning.
Thank you for having me.
Marshall, where can people find you? Where can they find Construct School and your goals and all of this public stuff?
So much stuff. Okay, well, I am on Twitter, twitter.com/glass eyeballs. I am on Instagram as auto.antonym. I am on SoundCloud as Glass Eyeballs, and the concept band I'm in with my partner is on SoundCloud as Curve Breakers. Construct.school is the website for the classes that I'm teaching, though the enrollment is closed at the moment. What else? Maybe that's it. Glasseyeballs.com. Yeah, I have a mailing list actually, and right now it's on MailChimp, but one of my art goals for February is to migrate it from MailChimp to something else so that I can actually start publishing on it, because at the moment it's like kind of a what have I been up to newsletter, and starting next month I'm going to try to use it to actually send people pieces of my art. So if you want my art in your email inbox, go to Glass Eyeballs and sign up for my mailing list.
As you all can see, I had so much fun talking with Marshall. Please be sure to follow them and to support all of their work. Remember to like and subscribe to the Modern Philosophy Podcast on your favorite podcast app. Please leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app or on Spotify. You can find us on Anchor at anchor.fm/Ashlee Haze, no dash. And remember to follow us on Instagram. That's at Modern Philosophy. That's modern with an E on the end. Thank you all so much for tuning into the Modern Philosophy Podcast, where together we are learning better, doing better, and being better. I'll see y'all next time.